today is the 7th in a series of talks based on the principles set forth by Dr. Wayne Dyer, which he called Top 10 Principles for Manifesting with Your Mind. And in this 7th principle, he quotes Dr. Albert Einstein. You can't solve a problem with the same mind that created it. When I first heard this quote, probably in my 20s, I thought to myself, well, I'm up the proverbial creek without a paddle because I do not know how to change my mind. After all, my mind is my mind. And of course, looking back on that younger self, I did not realize then how easy it can be to change one's mind literally and figuratively when we incorporate higher spiritual principles. But since this quote came from Albert Einstein, I needed a short refresher course. Albert Einstein was a German-born theoretical physicist. I'm reading that, I'm going, theoretical physicist, where have I heard that name? Oh, Dr. Sheldon Cooper, of course, theoretical physicist. Those like me who don't know what a theoretical physicist is, they invent and study theories which are then written in mathematical language. These theories focus on the more formal aspects of physics, which are concerned with the nature and properties of matter and energy. Nope, don't understand it. Dr. Einstein is widely held to be one of our greatest and most influential scientists, and is probably best known for developing his theory of relativity, E equals mc squared, or energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. So when I'm writing these, I'm always curious, well, what is the speed of light? It is 186,282 miles per second. So therefore, the speed of light squared is, forget about it. Essentially, though, Dr. Einstein proposed that space and time were intertwined in an infinite fabric, like an outstretched blanket, and a mass object like the sun bends the space-time blanket with its gravity so that light no longer travels in a straight line as it passes the sun. Nope, still don't understand it. I am completely in awe. So we can see how Dr. Einstein knew a bit about solving problems. But did you know, you probably have heard this, that he came to some of his theories coming out of dreams. He would have dreams. And this theory of relativity came from some dream about sheep. I don't know what it was, but, he believed, lived, and worked from the understanding that we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. As life presents challenges, our response is most often rooted in the familiar, in the patterns of thought that led us to these difficulties in the first place. It's human to rely on what we know, to draw from past experiences and from understandings of others who have traveled these same paths. Yet, when we draw from experience, we cannot expect a different outcome. By employing identical thinking patterns that gave birth to the issue in the first place, we will come back to the same result again and again. It does not matter whether our limitations stem from lack of understanding, lack of creativity, or fear. We will eventually circle back around to the same conclusions. It does not matter how hard we push that envelope, we will circle around to the same conclusions. I'm sure we can all remember instances in our lives where we attempted to solve problems using the same thinking that created them in the first place. Going in circles and just becoming more frustrated. Now, any of you who used to use the old Excel spreadsheets, you will be familiar with the term circular reference. I love that term, circular reference, because it's so just pinpoints exactly what we're talking about here. In this circular way of thinking, we believe that if we just push harder, we will get different results. Always trotting the same path will get us back to exactly where we started. I'm reminding of the phrase, when you're in a hole and getting deeper, quit digging. Real resolution requires departure from past ways of thinking. We need to venture into unknown territory and challenge the boundaries of thought, expectations, and especially challenge the way we want it to work out. We must be willing to give up the idea of how it has always been and how we want it to be. We need to think outside the box, for the solution may be right in front of us, but obscured from our vision by fear and trepidation. Fear, one of the biggest things that holds us in old patterns of thinking and leads us down familiar paths to the same conclusion, time and again. We continue to remain within the confines of what we know because, after all, it's what we know. We are human and subject to human patterns of doing and thinking. And yet, Dr. Einstein and Dr. Dyer invite us to push these boundaries. They invite us to dig deep within to find strength and fortitude to discover another way. And in order to find a different way, we need to bring our fully integrated self. We need body, mind, and spirit all working together. How do we do this? Well, one of the best ways is with the tools of prayer and faith. And it sounds incredibly hard and incredibly easy at the same time. Prayer and faith provide courage to transcend our limitations and encourage us to break down barriers, to be willing to give up old ways of thinking and to surrender to the forces beyond our immediate comprehension. Prayer and faith. Dr. Einstein's words, we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them, are beyond linear intellectual thinking. They resonate, though, on a deeper level, inviting a transformational journey into what may as yet be unknown, to take us beyond old patterns to a realm of limitless possibilities. And at this point, I'd like to tell you a story. It's story time. Stories, obviously. So this story was told by Carolyn Meese in a live workshop that she did on prayer. No surprise there. Took place in Cincinnati about 20 years ago. A woman by the name of Cindy, she was a very well-known and prolific journalist, respected. It was Christmas Eve, and she found herself at odds ends. Her husband and two grown sons were gone, and she just didn't know what to do with herself, feeling like, I've got to get out, I've got to get out. Which, ironically, is God calling to us to move beyond habitual thinking. So she finds a church that is having a Christmas Eve service. Now, Cindy is what we call a lapsed Catholic. She was raised within the Catholic Church and baptized within the Catholic faith, but it had been 20 years since she had been to church. So she goes to this little church, and it's poor, kind of a sad little congregation. Her words were, it looked like God's odds and ends in the church. So she sits in the very back, in a pew in the very back, so she'll be able to see, but hopefully won't be seen. I'm sure we all recognize that one. Yes, I want to see, but please don't notice me. So she listens to the homily and all of the prayers, and she's getting ready to leave before the communion. But one of the people in the congregation come and they ask her to take the element of the bread up to the altar to the priest. She goes, no, yes, no, yes. So finally she agrees to take the bread up to the priest, and she walks up to him, and he sees her. He recognizes that she is not one of his God's odds and ends. And he looks at her and kind of chuckles. She is touched that he has recognized that she is new, that the connection. So she hangs in there, and she waits for the priest to prepare the elements, the blood and the wine. Yeah, it's like the bread and the wine. And then instead of giving the communion elements to the congregation, he goes over to the side and he opens up a little sliding door, a little screen, and he hands the communion elements to someone behind the screen, and all she can see is a black veil. Well, she's intrigued. So she waits around after the church to talk to the priest, and she says, what was that? What were you doing? And he said, well, I'm a Franciscan, and those are the poor Clares. Well, let me just give you a little backstory here, because when St. Francis of Assisi was setting up his order in 1200 AD in Assisi, Italy, it was only for the men. But there was a woman by the name of Clare who was very good friends with Francis, and together with Francis, they set up an order for women, and it was called the Poor Clares. Now, within the Poor Clares, when the women would go into the convent, they would be cloistered. In other words, they would never leave again. And their job was to pray for the world. So the priest says, okay, I'm a Franciscan, and these are the Poor Clares. And she says, well, what do they do? He says, well, they pray. Oh. And he says, and some of them have been in the convent over 60 years. In fact, Mother Michael, the head, has been in the convent 68 years. So it's been 68 years since she's been out of that building. Cindy's intrigued. Her journalist antenna are, waving up here. She goes, oh, I just really want an interview. Well, I'm sorry, he says, they're busy. What do you mean they're busy? I'm busy. I have a husband. I have a job. I have children. I'm busy. What are they doing? He says, they're praying. Well, who are they praying for? She thought, the world, the sick, He looks her square in the eye and he says, for you. Now she really is caught. She says, I really, really want to interview Mother Michael. He's just shaking his head. She says, if I give you a letter of introduction and a request for an interview, will you give it to Mother Michael? Well, sure. So she goes home and she writes this letter of introduction, which lists all of her accolades and the articles that she's written and how well she's respected in the community. And she brings it back and she gives it to the priest, and he goes, okay, I'll give it to her. So Cindy comes back the next week for Mass and asks the priest, have you heard anything? And he goes, no. She comes back the next week, have you heard anything? No, they're busy. She comes back the next week, have you heard anything? No. Well, this just keeps going on. But Cindy keeps coming to Mass, which is one of the ways God works under the covers in our lives. Because what she thought she really was going for was something other than what God had in mind. God had in mind to bring her back into the church. And she did. She kept coming back. And after a year, she got a letter from Mother Michael, said, I'm sorry, I can't, give you an interview. We're just much too busy. Mother Michael. Well, Cindy thinks, okay, I'll take another tack. So she writes an article that is picked up by the newspaper, and it talks about these women, the poor Clares, who are cloistered, but all they do is pray for people. They pray for the world. They pray for you. And this article, like I say, it was picked up in the local newspaper, and people started coming to the church. This church started growing, becoming, more vibrant and alive, and it just the pews are filling up. And another 6 months goes by, and Cindy says to the priest, she says, "Well, have you shown my article to Mother Michael?" He goes, "No, she doesn't care." But she keeps coming to Mass. 2 years go by. She writes another letter. And in this letter, in all humility, she asks Mother Michael for an interview. Just simply, "May I have an interview? May I speak with you?" And Mother Michael grants her the opportunity of an interview. So she's excited. She goes out and she buys a new outfit, forgetting entirely that the women are cloistered. She won't be able to see her. And besides that, this woman's been in the cloister for 68 years. What does she care about fashion, right? But Cindy's all excited. And she goes, and of course, she can't see Mother Michael. Mother Michael's behind the screen. But okay, she's been waiting 2 years. She's so excited. So she starts off with kind of minutia questions of what's it like, what's your life like, what do you do, those kind of, things just on the surface, those little surface questions. Finally, Mother Michael looks at her and she says, "Ask the one question that you want answered." And Cindy says, "What was it like when God called your name? What was it like when God called your name?" And Mother Michael said, "Okay, I'll tell you. I was in Rome and I was an artist. I was just on the verge of becoming very successful. I was getting ready to do a show that I knew was really going to put me over that mark of being just a struggling artist and a successful artist. People were really starting to appreciate my work." And I was so thankful. I was so grateful to God. So being in Rome, I went to St. Peter's Basilica, beautiful, beautiful St. Peter's there in Rome. And she said, "I got on my knees and I was offering a prayer of gratitude to God. Thank you so much for all of this that is happening. And I heard God call to me, and God said, 'Come to me.'" And she said, "Oh, please, not now." And she heard, "Come to me." And so she left her paintings. She came back to the States, put her affairs in order, and entered the Poor Clares convent, when that had been 68 years before. So when Cindy asked for the interview the first time, it was full of ego. When she asked for the interview the second time, she had gotten in touch with her heart, with her soul. She had integrated all of that and come to ask Mother Michael in all humility if she could speak with her. And this is how we change our minds. We really change our heart. And we bring our heart and our brain together, working together in communion. Heart, brain, body, mind, soul, everything we bring together. We change our heart. That is how we change our mind. Namaste.